Hi everybody, I'm here with Douglas McGuire. He is the coordinator of the FLR mechanism here at FAO headquarters in Rome. And we got just some three short questions. So what do you think is the biggest challenge for FLR and how can forced education be a part of it?
Okay, well thanks Max. It's nice to speak with you guys and all the students who are out there. I think forest and landscape restoration, one of the biggest challenges we have is understanding that it's really a landscape approach that we're using, and we have to recognize that the restoration work is not only including one particular sector. We call it forest and landscape restoration. Here at FAO we use the word "and" because we feel that it's important. We're not talking only about forest ecosystems, we're talking about many different productive activities that are found within a landscape. And so the challenge, one of the big challenges, is to try to get the different sectors and the different stakeholders representing different institutions in different sectors to start dialoguing and discussing in a meaningful way, so that we're really looking at the landscape as a whole, everything that's within that landscape, and what the connections are and how they need to really be understood, the impact of one upon another, in order to have a really sustainable approach to landscape management. So that's a big challenge, is how to get the sort of the cross-sectoral and integrated approach working. It's easier said than done because we all tend to be sort of working in our sectors and in our silos, so breaking out of that is not so easy. But I think relating it to the education part of your question, it's really important that we start to train people, young people in particular, in institutions in a way that is now breaking out of the silos. We tend to still train people, and especially I would say in a lot of developing countries, the curricula in forestry schools and institutions that are dealing with natural resources management have not really evolved so much to be teaching the integration and how and why that's important. And so young people are being still trained in a much more sort of classical way that doesn't help them understand early on the importance of sort of a multi-cross-sectoral approach. So we are trying to see if we can build some new projects and programs where we can start to develop new curricula, more innovative and cross-sectoral curricula in institutions of higher learning. In particular, we're looking at Africa right now. There's still a long ways to go, but I think that's where we could make some real strides in teaching, training people and educating them at a young age the importance of going beyond a single silo approach.
Good. So could you explain to our IFSA members how the financing landscape for FLR is right now and how it will be changed in the future?
Okay. Funding and financing for forest and landscape restoration for FLR is on the increase, which is good news. We see, because of the high level of political, let's say, visibility and the motivation and the push that we have now for FLR at the global level, and now increasingly at regional levels through some of the regional initiatives. We have AFR 100, for example, in Africa, the initiative 20 by 20 in Latin America. We see an increased flow of financing, mainly through projects, sort of typical development projects, the way we normally do business to support countries. The number of projects and the funding that's coming through those projects is increasing. And that's important, that's good news, but it's not adequate. We think that the real potential for restoration and for going to scale, because many of the countries that are engaging in restoration now, they've made pledges of millions of hectares to be restored. Huge, huge targets. And the only way those are actually going to be achieved is through a much greater participation and involvement of the private sector. And so the financing that we expect to come and to really make a difference in this restoration work globally is probably going to be coming more from private sector sources and from sources of finance like banks, financial institutions that up until now have not so much been part of the discussion and the dialogue. So that's where we need to be looking, but to get there we need to have new projects and programs that are financially viable. We have to be able to demonstrate that restoration is financially attractive, that we are coming up with projects and project ideas that are much more bankable, as we say, so that a financer, a potential financier coming in can see, okay, this is something I'm interested in because I think there's a bottom line that can be achieved. Most investors need to make money off of their investment, and so that's an area of work that needs quite a bit of push, but I think it is the future for FLR.
Sounds good. And how can we ensure no competition between FLR and food security?
Well, I think it gets back to the issue of how are we working. If we're working in silos, then we have potentially a real problem in that area. Because if we're looking at restoration simply for sort of environmental benefits and for restoring for ecosystem services that are related to more of an environmental perspective or a conservation perspective, then we may have difficulties, and we might even have competition at some point, because people might say, or institutions might say, we can't touch this land because it's important for restoration, it's important for biodiversity, and so any agricultural use may be sort of off limits. Yet at the same time, there may be real needs for food security, for local people to be expanding agriculture because of growing populations, etc. So somehow these things need to be reconciled. But I think we need to recognize that restoration will not always be a win-win situation, that there may be trade-offs. Okay? In fact, in many landscapes, in most landscapes, there will be trade-offs, and we have to be aware of that. So, if you are really trying to achieve better food security, you may be sacrificing a little bit in terms of the biodiversity that you're trying to maintain or sustain in a given situation. So it's just a question of balance and a question of making sure that all of those potentially competing interests are taken into consideration early on, and then I think we can maybe not avoid all potential conflicts, but at least we can mitigate the damage and maximize what we can get from the whole thing.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for your time and to be here with us. And
sure, my pleasure, and good luck with everybody. And it's been nice to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you.